Hey guys, hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm kind of drunk at the moment, but I had the sudden urge to make a video, so if this happens to suck, then I apologize in advance. But basically the reason I'm here today is, well, it's Best Girl's birthday. Yes, today is January 24th, so I thought I'd make a Dona video, alright? I'm gonna be analyzing her famous quote from the web novel, "Why must love fade?" This is actually one of my favorite questions of all time, along with "Where's my dad?" Now, if this question were to be taken literally, my answer would be, I don't know. But that's the most important part. Dona isn't asking the question literally, it's actually a metaphor, and it does in fact have an answer. So this is my slightly drunk interpretation of its deeper meaning and basically what I think Dona's really asking when she says it. But before I start talking about Dona, I want to address this question's relevance to normal people like you and me. This might be a long shot, but I'm assuming that some of you watching this have at some point had a girlfriend. If that applies to you, you might be familiar with what we call the honeymoon stage. This is the early stage of a relationship most commonly known for the initial enthusiasm, exhilaration, and excitement. But it's also known for being a phase, meaning that at some point it will inevitably fade.
It hits hard, Morty, then it slowly fades.
This happens because as we grow familiar with something, we get used to it and slowly start taking it for granted. Once that initial excitement leaves us, we start to crave that feeling once more. This is what causes a lot of relationships to go downhill. As humans, our inherent greed causes us to want more even if everything's going fine. Because of our greed, we never truly understand what we have until it's gone. So that's how it affects us normal people, but Dona is a completely different story. Dona is not a normal person. She doesn't think like one, she doesn't act like one. So to analyze her quotes, you must first understand how she operates. Dona is endlessly plagued with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. While thirst is actually too light of a word to describe it, there doesn't seem to be an alternative that accurately portrays how extreme this type of craving is. I'll put it this way, Dona's appetite for knowledge is comparable to Daphne's appetite for food. When Dona doesn't get the knowledge she desires, it's kind of like having an itch that can only be scratched by gaining the knowledge. So to avoid that unpleasant feeling, she ends up being practically controlled by her desires, allowing them to govern her decisions, even to the point of committing cruel acts simply to observe the outcome and fulfill her curiosity. Dona puts her pursuit of knowledge above everything else, and that is what I like to call greed. So obviously, Dona's original goal over 400 years ago was to gather as much knowledge as possible because she wanted to put it to good use by actually helping people. But a lot can change in 400 years, and that makes me question Dona's current motivation for seeking knowledge. So what I'm about to say applies only to the current Dona, not the original one whose motives were morally acceptable. I'm talking about the Dona that we know, the one who tried to manipulate Subaru into accepting a contract that would ultimately benefit only her. Here's the question I want to ask. Is knowledge truly what Dona desires above all else? Or does she simply wish to feel at peace? Knowledge is great and all, but try to look deeper than that. Like I said, Dona has a constant itch. Gaining knowledge is the only way to scratch it. So obviously she's gonna gain knowledge to scratch the itch. But if there was another way to scratch the itch, would she still care about gaining knowledge? If Dona found something other than knowledge that was able to satisfy her, would she abandon her greed? That's the question. Does she ultimately want knowledge or satisfaction? Obviously right now the two are connected, but if they were separate, which one would she pick? You can ask the same thing about Daphne. If her endless hunger suddenly went away, would she continue eating everything in sight? I don't think she would. What I'm trying to say is, it's not knowledge that Dona truly desires. Satisfaction is what she truly desires, while knowledge is just her means of achieving it. So in reality, Dona isn't greed. She's a victim of it. And that brings us to the legendary quote, "Why must love fade?" This has been my favorite quote ever since I read it in the web novel, and I feel that it actually says a lot about Dona. So we've got two occurrences where she says this quote. once at the end of the Arc 4 appendix, and once at the end of the Casanero if story. So first, let's talk about Casanero. As we learned in Arc 4, Dona really wanted to form a contract with Subaru. She believed that return by death was the ultimate ability, for someone like her at least. She believed that it could grant her endless possibilities for endless knowledge, and thus endless satisfaction, right? Sadly, no. No matter how hard she tries, her satisfaction never lasts. In Casanero, Subaru gives her what she wants. Finally, return by death is at her disposal. At first, she was delighted, but at the end of the story, she gives us that quote, doesn't she? Even so, why must love always fade? Return by death, what she herself claimed to be the ultimate ability, was no longer enough to satisfy her. And that's because love always fades. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, love in the quote is actually a metaphor for the satisfaction you get when you achieve your goal. In this case, gaining knowledge via return by death was the goal. Dona reached said goal, but as we saw by the end of the story, the satisfaction she received from reaching it had already begun to fade. In the Arc 4 appendix, Dona has transferred her soul into Omega and is now once again roaming the physical world for the first time in 400 years. That sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? That should definitely be enough to satisfy her, right? Well, it was, for a couple minutes. Once again, she was delighted when she took her first breath of air and stared into the sun, but after some time passes, suddenly it's no longer enough for her. Her greed wants more. Just minutes after returning to the physical world for the first time in 400 years, her satisfaction is already starting to fade because of her greed. Towards the end of the chapter, she pops a flower in her mouth and wonders to herself why flowers have to wilt. She doesn't understand why they can't stay blossomed forever. Another metaphor, she doesn't understand why she can't stay satisfied forever. Why must satisfaction fade? Why must love fade? She says. She uses love in the quote because, as we learned in Arc 4, Dona is unable to understand that emotion. And because satisfaction always leaves her, she doesn't understand it either. So using love, an emotion she doesn't understand, as a metaphor for satisfaction, a feeling she doesn't understand, is a very fitting choice, in my opinion. Because she doesn't understand love, she'll never have it. And because she doesn't understand what it means to be truly satisfied, she never will be. So the quote would be, if taken literally, why does my satisfaction always fade? But remember guys, it's her greed that causes her satisfaction to fade. So the answer to the question, why must love fade, is greed. And the fact that she's asking it in the first place means that she doesn't understand greed. That's what her quote means. That's what she doesn't understand. She's not asking about love, she's asking about greed. She's the witch of greed who doesn't understand the very concept she represents. She literally has all the knowledge in the world, yet the one thing she doesn't understand is herself. So this quote is actually much more than a simple rhetorical question. It gives us a vague yet solid idea of the conflict that goes on in Dona's head. This one single brief quote provides us with a much deeper understanding of her character, and that's why I love it so much. Dona's an incredibly complex character on the outside, but when you look on the inside, it gets even more complex, and this kind of stuff is just so interesting to me. So that's my opinion, guys. If you want me to elaborate further, leave a comment and I'll reply to it when I'm sober, but let me know if you agree with what I said in the video or if you just think I'm a drunk idiot. Regardless, it's still an epic fucking quote. I don't think anyone's gonna argue against that. It's epic enough to be in my Twitter bio, which by the way, you can follow me if you want. If you've got a Dona profile pic, I will automatically follow you back, but yeah, I just thought I'd give my drunk interpretation on one of the most memorable quotes from the web novel. Thanks guys for watching the video. I hope at least some of this made sense. I know I kinda suck at explaining stuff, but pretty much TLDR, Dona's fucking awesome, alright? Keep talking about ReZero, guys. Why must love fade? I'm out.